Welcome to the Truth Over Comfort show. Today's returning guest is Matthew Ho, who's been on, I think this might be the 11th time or 10th time. It's been quite a few times. We've spoken about everything from Afghanistan, your time, obviously, experiences in Afghanistan, Iraq. We've spoken about Ukraine, Iran, I think most recently, Julian Assange, veteranhood, basically everything. For people who don't know you, you obviously served within kind of Afghanistan, Iraq in different roles within the military and the government. You then went on to work for the State Department and Pentagon within policy and resigned famously in 2009 after Obama surged the troops or was going to surge the troops, which made you the public figure you are today. And currently, you're still working at the Eisenhower Media Network, if I'm
Correct.
correct.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's great to have you here again, Matt. It's always good speaking with you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me back on. It's been like we are saying, it's been a while though.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to see you again.
Yeah, it's been so long actually. I was like, because I thought, oh, people are familiar with you, but I was like, oh, the bio. I was like, it's been so long since I've actually read back over it. Is there anything I missed there, or kind of?
No, no, sounds good. I'm sorry people had to listen through it all. It's kind of long.
Yeah, I'll put it on the screen, everything people can read it. But so today we was going to talk about kind of Veterans Day, Armistice Day in the UK and everything around it, what it means, the lessons that are meant to have been learned that haven't been learned, your experiences in America with it, in I guess a more militarized society than most countries. The UK aren't really far off it, but you definitely take it a lot further
Yeah.
within sports and thanking everyone constantly for their service as you talk about. But it is still quite a serious day in the UK. So yeah, if you just want to kind of talk to people about it, how it resonates with you. You know, you did a talk the other day. I put it in the show notes and everything. People want to watch that too. But this seemed like a subject, obviously, you've spoken about before. And can you just explain to people kind of your thoughts about it and what it means to you?
Certainly this deification, Louis, right? If of veterans, and particularly in the United States, and I think we are a few steps ahead of where you are in the UK, and the UK is pretty bad with the militarization as it is, right? And with the glorification of veterans to serve political purposes. But I would say what you all go through during the period leading up to Remembrance Sunday is what the United States goes through the entire year. Every day in the United States, it's essentially Veterans Day, to the point that when we do have Veterans Day, it seems, at that point, anticlimactic because all the discounts, all the requirements to say thank you for your service, all the celebration of veterans, the memorials, the services. You know, my town here, a small town, once a month they honor a veteran during a ceremony outside the flagpole outside of City Hall, outside Town Hall. I mean, in the whole thing, I mean, with guy playing taps and people in uniform and a whole ceremony. It's every month they do that. So by the time you get to Veterans Day in the U.S., it's a little bit done already. But if you can imagine, for those who are watching in the UK, the about when people start putting the poppies on, which seems to be getting, which is a pretty long period of time. I feel like you all wear those for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe. But this idea of utilizing veterans, creating it into a religious political institution that serves to provide a common identity for the American people in a religious sense, right? Or in some sense of a higher purpose or some sense of sacrifice. And so what you see that then is you see that through how not just how you have these ceremonies, memorials. I get money as a veteran. I just bought a sweatshirt. I got 25% off the sweatshirt because I'm a veteran. That doesn't apply on Veterans Day. That applies on every day of the year. That's common here. That's if it doesn't happen, and there have been veterans who've made stinks, who've made issues about not getting discounts. So it becomes there's an expectation, right? But there's so much to this. And I'll just leave it because I could go on for a long time about this. But just to the point being is that there's a purpose behind it. That this celebration of veterans, this memorialization, this deification of them, is meant to manufacture consent for the government, manufacture consent in particular for militarization or for militarism, excuse me, and for wars. And so, as we were talking about earlier, you say how at the Remembrance Sunday marches, you always see the prime ministers there, and as well as other figures in government, and they don't seem to learn a lesson. Well, the lesson is that things such as that march to the cenotaph, right? That celebration, that memorialization that occurs on that day, or in the United States on every day, that is a tool. That is a object. That is something that can serve political interests. So when the idea of that, there's no lessons learned when you see these politicians at these memorial services, well, they do know the lessons. They know the power of that memorial. They know the power of celebrating and promoting and deifying veterans. It means that when it comes to issues of war and peace, it is very easy to shout down your opposition because they are not being respectful of past wars, the sacrifices made. They are not honoring the troops. They are betraying those on active duty or active service now, right? It's a very easy tool to use, a very easy weapon to use. And so that's the lesson that these politicians have learned from, things such as the March on Remembrance Sunday.
It seems kind of counterintuitive because in the UK, if have Remembrance Sunday, it's about remembering obviously what we fought for. And in the UK, people are very proud of obviously, especially World War II, which I think most people would consider a different war to pretty much any other before or since, and that you can kind of be proud of it because obviously the Nazis were so evil. But it's kind of counterintuitive to say that you could use that day to the benefit of more war, because the whole
Right.
point of it is to remember about people who died and let's avoid these situations. So how exactly is that? I know it's different in America, but I guess for the
Yeah.
example here, how exactly can it be used to actually push people towards more the ideas they want with war if the whole point of the day is to kind of remember it and go, let's not do this again?
Right. I mean, so if you look at Remembrance Sunday and its genesis, its beginning in the immediately after the First World War, and the returning soldiers carried banners that said "Never again." And if you look at the message, if you look at the motivation, the meaning behind those original marches, was clearly that never again. It was an anti-war movement that was the underlying motivation for the soldiers who marched, the soldiers who returned from the trenches who marched. Over time, particularly following the Second World War, as the United States and the UK enter into essentially a wartime state. Throughout the Cold War, it is a wartime positioning on all levels by both the American and the British government, including cultural, including media, including propaganda. So what you have occurring is you have following the Second World War, and particularly the narrative that comes out of the Second World War about how the Allies saved the world. Now have this other Manichaean threat, this other clearly evil threat in the Soviet Union. This is the narrative from, the Americans and the British. And so to have now a holiday or a Remembrance Sunday whose message is clearly anti-war be of paramount importance or primary has a primary role in the culture of your country, well, that becomes really problematic. Because as you're setting up this Cold War policy of us versus them and clearly delineating good versus evil, right? Well, how do you have this holiday that tells us essentially that all these tales were being told about why we need to have this Cold War and why we must be prepared to go to war against the Soviets? Well, if you understand the message from Remembrance Sunday, what those soldiers were telling us who marched. They're telling you not to believe this message that we have to go to war with the Soviet Union, right? I mean, so the Remembrance Sunday originally message, and you know, same as in America as what we call Armistice Day. This is one of never again. And it not just never again in the folly of the slaughter, but the lies that go into it, as well as to what are the objectives, what are the goals, why are these countries pursuing these aims? You know, in the First World War, this is a clash of monarchs, right? These were all they're all dying, kind of failing empires, or on the cusp of that. You know, the end was near for them, but they. But essentially, that's what that war is about. It's an imperial war. And so when you have that understanding about this is what the veterans of the First World War were saying to us, you know, like this idea of having Remembrance Sunday or Armistice Day becomes problematic. And so what you have is a shift in the purpose of the holiday. And it becomes not about the geopolitical, it becomes not about the reasons for the wars or the reality of war itself, but it becomes to celebrate, right? To honor, to pay tribute to veterans. And it's done in such a manner that it is religious. And you have a deification of veterans where there can be no criticism of them. There can be no disrespect shown, however disrespect might be. And it may be in the UK by wearing a white poppy rather than a red poppy. And the white poppies don't mean you're supporting the enemy. It says that you're just remembering all victims of war. But that somehow is grievous. That somehow is dishonoring the memory of veterans by wearing the white one rather than the red one. How dare you remember anyone else other than the soldiers, right? I mean, like that type of thinking is, you know, when you unpack it, my God, that's ghastly. That's wait, what type of you know, as Chaplin said in The Great Dictator, machine men with machine hearts would enforce such a distinction. So what you have happen actually in the United States is because Armistice Day is again so problematic in terms of countering our countering the American Cold War policy with the Soviet Union, that they rename it. And they changed in 1954. The American Congress changed its Armistice Day to Veterans Day. The stated reason being is that, well, the World War II veterans are feeling left out by not being included on Armistice Day because it specifically refers to, you know, the 11th hour, 11th day, the 11th hour, 11th day, 11th month, you know. But I think anyone takes more than a few minutes to look at this, you realize how specious of an argument that was. And so you have an acceleration of the utilization of veterans for political purposes throughout the Cold War. And it really starts peaking, particularly in the United States and in the UK, with the leadership of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. So that the criticism of war implies criticism of soldiers and criticisms of veterans. I mean, that's how this thing continues to develop. And finally, after the end of the Cold War, you have a real use of this celebration of veterans, particularly once the global war on terror begins. And you see that especially in the United States, but I know it occurred in the UK, where questioning of the war in Iraq implies that you don't support the troops. Questioning the war in Iraq implies that not only that means you are supporting the goals of Al Qaeda and the Taliban and Saddam Hussein, and so you're supporting those who are fighting our troops. I mean, like the inanity of it is kind of staggering when you stop to pull it apart. But it is effective, and it does. It shuts people down, and then the glorification, the celebration of veterans gets to a fevered pitch in the United States, where you can't mention that you're a veteran without somebody saying thank you for your service. Like if you're wearing a T-shirt or you're anything, they see your veterans healthcare identification card, whatever it is. You know, people are going to celebrate you for being a veteran in a way that is really quite, I think, would be alarming to people outside the United States.
Yeah, I mean, going back to World War One, I mean that war in particular, there is genuine kind of debate where people go, obviously in the US, massive, like should we have got involved defending, getting to these European wars, especially on the side of their old arch enemy, Great Britain. But in England, in the UK, there's still a bit of a debate, did we need to get involved? And everyone does kind of look back and there's like jokes, like, what was it even about? And
Right.
people definitely kind of separate that from other wars. And I do think it is important at the end of the day to remember World War One and World War Two because it's just crazy to even think about being in that situation and what they had to go through, including on especially World War One, the German side, because I feel like people kind of lump World War One and World War Two together with like the evil Kaiser, but like, because you could go in World War Two, well, I don't feel that sorry for the Germans who died, like they're Nazis, where some people might go there, but World War One, like it just wasn't really the same. I mean, they was what three of Queen Victoria's grandchildren.
Right. Yep. There's that famous yeah, there's a famous photo where they're all sitting around. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the Kaiser, obviously the king on our side, King George, and then I think it's actually the Tsar's
Mhm.
wife, but the Tsar is also their cousin, so related as well. But I'm pretty sure it's actually the Tsar's wife who's the grandchild. I have to check. But
Yeah, yeah, she was. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Yeah. The czar's wife. I mean, he was, um, but yeah, there is. Well, in the United States, uh, people who know about it, I think, understand the economic aspects of it. There's two lines of thought. One is just the uh, crusade or the vision that Woodrow Wilson had for the world. And so that has, I think, a lot to do with him being influential in getting the United States into the war. He's the president of the United States, of course, he was influential, but why he was ended up eventually being disposed to do it. He came to believe what was being fought for was, righteous. And then the other is I think the one that's more commonly appreciated is that we had loaned a lot of money to the British and the French, and if we didn't send our boys over there to defeat the Germans, we might not get that money back. And so I think that is ultimately what pushes the United States into the war. I actually read over the summer. I read John Maynard Keynes's you could take this out because I'm having a moment trying to remember the name of the book he wrote following the First World War about the reparations, about the Versailles settlement. Um, uh, oh Christ, what's it called? Anyway, but
I'll
it's
put it on the screen after.
yeah, yeah, thanks. Yeah, but it is it's a really important work to read. I wish I'd read it earlier. But it shows just how the cost of peace was going to be. That Keynes is essentially saying that what we are doing here to the Germans, we're getting our pound of flesh, getting our Carthaginian victory here, is going to be ruinous to us. That this will bring about another world war. That this type of cruelty against the Germans, that this will be viewed as unjust, and that this will cause another war. And he absolutely was right about that.
Yeah, going back to what you said, J.P. Morgan lent a lot of money, didn't he? The J.P. Morgan
Yeah,
banking family lent a lot of money to the British. I think there was a quote like we was meant to be neutral. They're like we didn't know how to be neutral, and there was quite a lot of Anglophiles. Even was it Colonel House who was like Wilson's like right hand man? He was a Anglophile because there's the Lusitania story, isn't there, where
right.
in his journal he's writing back and forth to Lord Grey, and they discussed basically, what would happen if a American ship was taken out by like the Germans, and he'd go, I think that would absolutely bring us in. And then they go, what if it was the Lusitania? And then there's discussions, Lord Grey, the King, and Colonel House, where they literally say the Lusitania. And then I think it
Yeah.
was like not long after that, obviously, it got taken out, and the story was, there was all these Americans and tourists going they were on a tourist ship going through where there could be German U-boats. The Germans put out a warning. The British, I think Winston Churchill put it in his journal about how they was trying to manipulate situations that a ship might get blown up. And then they're like, no, it's neutral, it's neutral. I don't know how much it, brought America to the war, but it played a part. And then I think it was like 100 years later, they swam down and they found the cheese boxes were full of explosives and it wasn't a neutral ship. And but you can read
Right.
Colonel House is like he's literally going back and forth, and they literally quote the Lusitania, and I think it was like hours later. So it's interesting around that, but that was a bit of a tangent anyway. But with World War One, I think there's the lesson to be made is there's definitely not that again, and it's how easy a world war can break out over kind of nothing. Everyone has their different angles. I think Britain clearly saw the German rising empire. There was, talk of it. They didn't obviously didn't like that. Them and the French obviously carve up the Ottoman Empire. Kind of reminds me a bit of now about kind of how the US sees China like this rising empire and becomes more erratic. And the lesson is here: let's not let it happen again over economic rivals and other countries get dragged in. But you can see, I mean, Winston Churchill, especially, is used and World War Two to basically win people over in wars. It's like we use World War Two now as this example. We can't appease Putin. We can't appease this. We can't appease Saddam Hussein. What, don't be a Neville Chamberlain. Don't do this. And we use World War Two to actually create more war, which is quite bizarre. Again, the
Yeah.
lessons, everyone's there remembering everyone who fought for that and the freedoms it gave us and, whatever else you want to attach to it. And then they're like, that's why we need to go to war with this person because
Right.
you don't want to appease, or if even with Israel and Gaza, no matter what you think about it, the amount of times you hear, you know, Dresden brought up as some sort of comparison, like the Nazis fighting World War Two is at all similar to, Israel and Gaza, even the slightest, but it's constantly used World War Two, and we romanticize about it as well. But yeah, Winston Churchill, Boris Johnson wants to be a Churchill type, and in Ukraine, and again, it's like how is these examples of what we're meant to remember somehow spun into, Churchill was meant to be like he saved the UK, and then in these situations, they're trying to be like a Churchillian figure, but it's not about saving us. It's about like getting in there and and showing Putin what needs to be done and things like that. So it's kind of bizarre. I mean, as a veteran yourself, World War One and World War Two is obviously quite different, but fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan or being in Iraq and Afghanistan, how does it kind of make you feel when you see these figures kind of constantly using previous wars to justify new ones?
It's understandable in the sense that that's what they've got. That's what they got. It is ridiculous, right? It is ludicrous in the question of everyone always going back to World War II to justify, whatever it is they want to justify. Uh, you know, if you're younger than 80 years old, World War II is not in your living memory, and you have to be at least what 85 to actually maybe have a memory of it, right? I mean, so the nature of this, the fact that what the agenda is that's being pushed by the political establishment to utilize veterans and past wars in this way, because it is so false in itself, because, right, it is so hollow, right, and it's so superficial, and it's just, it is just untrue. Um, it makes sense that the war then that they point to the most now is the war from outside most of our lifetimes, right? The danger is that it's only going to get worse. That World War II will become more and more mythologized, and it already serves as the good war, and for a whole host of purposes, whether it be film, whether it be for politics, whether it be for our culture. That this idea of World War II as the good war, and so there's always that promise then, or there's a that this next war will be the good war, or it is reverential, that we have to support this war just as previous wars, because at the end of the day, the soldiers who are fighting it, they're doing this on our behalf, right? And it just becomes a circular line of argument where it just all feeds back into itself again. And yeah, I mean, but yeah, the use of World War II is certainly as strong, if not stronger than it's ever been. And like you said, both sides will use it. And oftentimes you'll see it's the talking point that people go to right away. It's become, a part of our vernacular, right? To utilize World War II in our conversations, in our arguments, in our lessons, in our histories, because it's so well ingrained into our culture.
And the interesting thing with like Dresden and World War Two, I think it was Winston Churchill actually in Parliament, and because people were like, would you call Dresden war crimes? And there's like an exact quote from Winston Churchill saying, "I think this might be too far. Like, are we committing war crimes?" Because they obviously were bombing civilians. So he actually himself did say
Right.
at the time, "Yeah, I'll dig it up. I'm sure." I saw an exchange and I looked it up, and he was like, not necessarily that he didn't do it, but he was like, is this, these are kind of war crimes that we're committing. And it's interesting to see someone say that in the context of those times where, Winston Churchill was pretty imperialist as well, Um,
Yeah,
so
Curtis LeMay, who commanded the American air campaign against the Japanese, said if we had lost that war, they would have hung us as war criminals. And the same thing too. Going into Korea, the United States runs the same type of air campaign against North Korea, burning everything down to the ground. And the same thing, the comments from MacArthur, from LeMay over that war was the same. The acknowledgement that what we've done here is commit war crimes, and I think that's why there's such a determination by the victors of World War II to create an international order, an international establishment with international law. And in particular, you see the modern laws of warfare being promulgated, right, and being adopted. And this really bothers me. This notion among those who feel that international law shouldn't matter, or that it's unrealistic, or that the men who wrote it and put it into being were weak men, and the same things toward the United Nations, or same things towards any type of international order institution. It was the victors, it was the men, many of them the generals of the Second World War, who put these laws, establishment orders into place. I mean, this idea that here in the United States they're changing the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War, right, for reasons solely having to do with their own personal insecurities, right? They should be talking to psychologists and psychiatrists about this, about their insecurities, not renaming the Department of Defense to the Department of War. But the idea that somehow the men who did that, the men, and I say men because that's essentially all who was in power at that point, the men who changed who created the Department of Defense, that these were weak men. The men who signed the Geneva Conventions were weak men. The men who built the United Nations were weak men. And you're talking about, on the American side, you're talking about Roosevelt, you're talking about Truman, you're talking about Eisenhower, you're talking about George Marshall, right? I mean, you're talking about the men who defeated Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany. And we have gone to the point now in this country where so little is understood about the Second World War, and then let alone anything outside of the Second World War, that that type of argument that we used to win every war, and then these weak men changed the Department of Defense to Department of War, and I mean, excuse me, Department of War to Department of Defense. And actually, there was one thing in between, just as an aside, for about 2 years, it was called the National Security Establishment. And then
So you was just talking there about the renaming. There was a period of time where it was called something else, the National Council. What was
Right,
it?
right. So actually, for a brief period of time, a year or so, maybe a year and a half, 2 years, the Department of War and Department of Navy, which have been merged together to create a new institution under one roof, essentially, and was called the National Security Establishment. And then in 47 or 48, with the National Security Act, yeah, of 1947, that then becomes the Department of Defense. But those in power now, the Trumps and the Hegseths and their loyalists will have you believe that this creation of this naming of the Department of Defense is not the reason, but is the explanation for America's loss. That by changing the name to something weak, something defensive, right? That is the reason why we lose the wars, because it is symbolic of the overall weakening of American culture, the overall lack of machismo, right? The overall lack of toughness or determination. And of course, what that all means is for them that this is when we started allowing black and brown people to join the military, or actually we integrated the services, so whites and blacks and Asians and Latinos were together, but also too, then women start coming in higher numbers as well, particularly after the Vietnam War. But the this idea though that somehow that these men who did this were weak when they were the ones who won the Second World War. They were the ones who defeated, and the horror of it, the self, the self understanding, the self awareness that, and it wasn't just the Americans and the Brits, but the Soviets as well, about what they had perpetrated, what they had done in the war, what the Second World War, ex, you know, showed, the deaths that humanity will go to, and with this, the now being in the nuclear era, these men that won the Second World War said we can never do this again. This can never happen again, because if it does, the world may never recover. You have this desire to create these institutions, create an international order, to establish international law, to prevent such a thing as a Second World War from ever happening. Not just only to potentially avoid the rise of powers like Germany and Japan, right? But to limit warfare, because it had become so excessive in the Second World War. And the very men who carried out those excesses were the ones who put this international order in place. But now, today, the understanding is that they were weak men, and they're the reason why we've lost all these wars these last 80 years.
Yeah, I mean the Department of War change was interesting. I mean, most people probably in your crowd and our crowd quite like it because it just like Trump is good at that because he just straight up just takes the mask off them. I mean, like there's no games, no like other presidents. Everything is for democracy. Everything is for this. Like
Right.
Hegseth, he was like, we was he said the U.S. military is like, made for violence. They're just taking the mask
Yeah.
off. Everything that's going on in Venezuela. I mean, I don't know how many people buy. A lot of people buy it because they just hate drugs like so much, and they're like, yeah, whatever, you go get them. But like, I mean, Trump really does take the mask off, and the Department of War it was good. It was a good change because it just tells you exactly what they're thinking. What they're I mean, a lot of people credit what was it Edward Bernays with the change originally for like PR purposes, change it from because it was the Ministry of War as well. Now it's the Ministry of Defense
Yeah.
in the UK, but to for their own population to show no, no, it's defensive. We would because it's like the arms dealers, Lockheed Martin, BAE Systems, it's the defense industry because it's all defense. And it's funny because people are like, yeah, we need more defense spending in the UK. We need to up it. We need to make ourselves safer. But everything we
Right.
spend more defense on, it's all offensive. It's like aircraft carriers for the Middle East for other countries who don't have air forces just to take it out. It's not like like the I guess the Iron Dome or Trump's idea of it, or in the UK, we're not setting up sort of defensive barriers in our country for if we got invaded, we'd be screwed. The UK. I mean, one, we're a small country. We've got the sea, which helped us through obviously generations, but everything we spend our defense on is offensive for wars of choice in places where we have like technological advantage. So it's all just kind of nonsense words, really. But it is good to see they've just done it, and it's just like, yeah, we're the Department of War now. But
It's
just going,
interesting, it's interesting you say that, Louis, because here in the U.S., as we have these immigration raids, right, going out throughout the country, and the National Guard, which is equivalent, I guess, to your territorial force, or what do you call your reserve force? Uh, okay, whatever it's called. The National Guard has been mobilized and brought into American cities to assist with the immigration's custom enforcement raids on immigrants. They're also brutalizing and detaining legal residents and American citizens as well. But a lot of the pushback on the soldiers being used, right, the National Guardsmen being used, is framed in this idea that they're supposed to be used overseas. The military is not to be used here at home. It's supposed to be used overseas. Not even the idea of that the military is supposed to be used to defend us. It's not even that. It's just they're supposed to be used over there against other people, not against Americans, right? I mean, so that construct of switching from war to defense, certainly it had those ideas behind it of making the population, or I should say, making the names of the institutions in sync with the narratives, right? This idea that we are in an existential Cold War with the Soviet Union, that they are threatening our way of life, right? That they are an evil empire, et cetera. So we are defense, right? We're not, because we're the good guys. The Soviets that are the ones that are offensive. And so you see all these realities of our society and our government, expressed through just simple things like what they name institutions.
yeah, but it's interesting with all of this again because people they're so take sorry the UK they take Remembrance Sunday very serious, and normally the people who do take it probably more serious seem to in other areas be more likely to push for it. They're more like hawkish on Iran or China, like a heartbeat that yeah we should defend Taiwan, like yeah like we should be doing that, like it's nothing to do with us. We don't need to get involved just like we did in World War I and World War II. You could argue we got involved in other people's affairs. We could have kind of left it alone more, maybe World War I. But like a heartbeat, they're just like, yeah, like we need to get involved. And the same, it's kind of the same with immigration as well. Like in the UK, it's a massive subject at the moment, and it is out of control. Don't need to go into all of that,
Yeah.
but the same people who will argue against like closing our borders to immigration, say like Reform, they're the new kind of party, Nigel Farage,
Right.
making a lot of headway because of immigration, and people are getting sick of it. Um, I mean, they completely backed Trump's action in Iran and Israel.
Right.
And it's like, okay, it didn't turn into a big regional war or go crazy. They didn't know that at the time. Say it did. I mean, there would be a massive immigration crisis from Iran or any other countries that were involved that would come to Europe. And it's like the same people who seem to be on that side, you end up on the other. It's quite funny. People on the left are more welcoming to refugees, but they're anti-war, and people more pro-war are more anti-immigration. It's like you need to
Right.
swap sides, and then you'd be able to get it. But Yeah, and the same again, they're very respectful towards veterans and their service. But then these wars create more veterans to remember, and people just don't seem to kind of even register, especially obviously how high it is in America, the suicide rates, the destruction of their, their family, their lives, their mental state, they're homeless. I mean, the odd homeless person you speak to, they're like, oh, I'm an ex-veteran, and that's just all like brushed under the rug. It's like at the time, you know, on Remembrance Sunday, if someone like slightly disrespected it, like going crazy, think of the veterans' family. But at no point when we're like on the verge of war with, say, Iran or Iraq, no one's like, well, these veterans are going to end up with PTSD and they'll be homeless. They go, well, that's kind of just the price to pay, isn't it? So all of these things we remember after. There's not even one discussion about it at the time. It's all, should we do it? Is it a good idea? Not, is it like moral, immoral? It's like, do you think we could pull this off? It's like the Iraq War. If it went better, I don't think anyone would be standing here talking about, oh, it's this big mistake. It's all like, it didn't really work out that well for us, did it? It was like Iran kind of got more power. Like, forget the homes go on the street. It's like, well, Iran kind of gained more influence. So, I mean, as a veteran yourself and you're going through your own struggles, and we did speak about that in a previous interview. I mean, what's on your mind when and have lots of friends in these situations, and it's remembered for like a day, and then, well, a bit different in America, but it's remembered for very shortly, and then veterans go back to their lives in whatever state it may be.
Yeah, you see with as you were bringing up, Louis, the after effects of war and the problem that provides to the political establishment and the institutions that are utilizing, this deification of veterans, the celebration of them, etc. Um, because while they fought in righteous wars, these wars were good and just. And particularly when you get into suicide and you start talking of issues of moral injury, which for combat veterans seems to be the leading cause of suicide. The guilt, the shame, the regret of the war. It's not because they were scared or anything like that. It's because they did things or they failed to do things that transgressed their own moral code, that transgressed their ethics, that transgressed who they are. And so we understand, and we've known for decades now, that combat related guilt is the best predictor of combat veteran suicide. And the issue you have then is how do you address that to the American Congress? How do you communicate that to the American people? Well, these veterans, these wars were righteous. They were the good guys. They were wearing the white hats. And now you're telling me because of what they did in the war, of their actions, that they're putting guns in their mouth and blowing off the back of their heads? That can't be. So it's the explanation for veteran suicide becomes politically impossible. And this all is again coming around in circle of the damage that's actually done to veterans by this celebration of them, by by honoring them continuously and creating them into like essentially a clerical class in the United States. That these issues that are affecting them, like why are they killing themselves, can't be addressed because that contradicts the narrative, and you can't have that. So you have all these issues that affect veterans that have been addressed much better in the last 20 years, but still, to your point, are not brought up when war is discussed. And, as we're looking at whatever is going to occur in Venezuela, there have been no discussions about what will be the cost to our veterans for a war in Venezuela or a war in Nigeria, or maybe putting troops into Gaza or whatever else they plan to do.
Yeah, and it does make it. I mean, I think probably my generation, my age group, because World War I and World War II maybe is getting further away, or we kind of it seems more see through. I don't think people take it probably as serious as older generations, and part of that it is because you want to remember the people who died, like the people who fought in World War One, World War Two, etc. You want to remember them because there it was, a rough period and a horrible time to be forced and conscripted into these wars. But then you see Tony Blair at the memorial service and other prime ministers, and you just it's hard to kind of take serious. You hear again, kind of going back to my other point, people take it very serious, but then you hear them another day just completely kind of juxtaposing that view with calling for a new Cold War or another war. So it is kind of harder to take serious, which takes away from the actual day, which is to remember them and take the lessons. But we don't take the lessons, so I don't know. I'm sure there's people in my generation who still do take it serious, but it. I think it's more of an older crowd there. I'm
Well,
not.
I think it's so insincere, right? It's so superficial and shallow. People see through it. People see through it, and I think the politicians are not trusted, But the weight of it here in the United States is so immense. The pressure that people are put under to fulfill a ritual obligation to thank a veteran for their service is just it permeates everything. And like I said, I can't anyone I don't say anyone, but almost all the people I meet, if they find out I was in the Marine Corps, it's an automatic thank you for your service. It's just that's just the requirement, the obligation that Americans live under, and to reverse that is going to take decades. It took decades to put that in place.
Yeah, it's a strange one because again, like if you find out someone's an Afghan or an Iraq veteran, normally you want to look at them in a good light because at the end of the day, the war turned out to be all lies and everything, but
Yeah.
maybe their intentions were good. Not necessarily always, but most people join the army and their intention was probably good. So you kind of want to thank them because they thought they was doing a very good thing, but they actually weren't. So it's kind of this issue where what the actual result of it was horrible, and you could go in on them and say, how dare you get into this, killing these innocent people? Do you know what you've done? And they probably do, but you want to go in with the good intention. So it's quite hard to navigate it, and there probably would be that internal pressure. Someone tells you they fought in this war, and you want to go, oh, how good of you to defend us. But the thing is, again, it's hard to take it serious because none of these wars are really defending us. You can't argue
Right.
the wars in the Middle East were to defend us. Just a
Yeah, I
question.
mean there's like this amazing dissonance, right? Where like the veterans are thanked because they're heroes. In the United States, you have that identification with veterans as heroes. We want to thank our heroes, that type of thing, or thank you for our freedoms. And at the same time, the people who are saying that will agree with you completely that the Iraq and Afghan wars were failures, that they were counterproductive, that they were immoral, that they were illegal, should never have been waged. Vietnam should never have been, most Americans, 7 or 8 out of 10 Americans will agree with that and will agree with the harshness of it. But then in the same or in the next sentence, they will say to a veteran, thank you for your service, with the implication that you are a hero. Okay, so if you were in the Iraq War, Afghan War, Vietnam War, those wars were immoral, unjust, illegal, etc., failed, counterproductive. How am I a hero? Right? How am I a hero? I mean, certainly people did heroic things, but to be in wars that are unjust, that are illegal, that are failed, that are counterproductive, that are immoral, that how can that allow for a whole class of people to be considered veterans, right? There's all these triumphal heralding, like there's all these triumphs of the American veteran, but juxtaposed against the realities of the war, it doesn't make any sense. It's dissonance. And so I think that one more example of the nonsense or the fabrication or the malarkey, if you will, that makes up so much of Veterans Day in the United States, Remembrance Sunday in the UK, and just the general celebration of veterans for the purposes of politicized militarism and more war. That's I think that's the case.
I've got about 10 minutes. Have you got 10 minutes as
Yeah,
well?
yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think a lot of people do view World War One, World War Two veterans as heroes, like genuinely. But it is quite a small time frame where you can do that until after a
yeah.
lot of people disagree. And then even before that, you're gonna go like, oh yeah, there was British soldiers in the Boer War where we had concentration camps with women and children pre-Nazi. Yeah,
Right.
those guys were heroes. I mean,
Yeah.
Cecil Rhodes, that
At the
group.
same
Like,
time as that, at the same time as that, you had the Americans in the Philippines. We killed maybe 1 million Filipinos. Something almost no Americans know about, by the way. Um, but I think I had a lot of family, older families. Most I didn't know, but some I did, who were in the Second World War. And my uncle Gabby, he went ashore the second day of D-Day, and so the idea of my great uncle Gabby uh, going into occupied France. I think there, as you said, there are these brief moments when what that was trying to be accomplished was in the greater understanding of history to be just, to be righteous. I mean, certainly we can pick apart World War II and we can criticize all kinds of aspects, particularly what the Allied governments were doing prior to 1938, 1939, right? I mean, who was, certainly here in the United States, you had many who saw Hitler as a better deal than Stalin. And certainly there is the understanding that the Allies thought prior to Hitler, starts physically taking territory, that Hitler could be controlled, that he was useful against Stalin, he could be a hedge. We could talk about that kind of all stuff, but that doesn't certainly mean or disqualify the reality of what Nazi Germany was doing, right? And the same thing in Asia, the reality of what Imperial Japan was doing. And the role that many of our relatives played in putting a stop to that. Now, the fact that the West and the Soviet Union as well, but as an American, the Americans immediately begin their own colonization, if you will. The spoils of victory following the Second World War, where that the American empire went from being one of several empires to being one of two empires. And of course, it worsens in 35 years ago when the United States becomes the only empire. And to serve those purposes, as we've been saying, you need narratives. You need certain understandings of history. And I think the ability to have to manufacture that in the great lengths that you see that the American military does to keep that type of resonance with the American people, that the American veteran and American soldier are fighting for your freedom. They're keeping us safe. They're defending our democracy, and they are the direct successors to the men who won the Second World War. They put billions and billions of dollars into that every year. The amount of money that the United States military has put into Hollywood by just providing ships and tanks and planes and thousands of sailors or soldiers when need be for a film crew. I mean, this is massive the way that the Pentagon is involved in Hollywood. They have script authority or script oversight authority on nearly all the studios in Hollywood. And so they have edited scripts for thousands and thousands of TV and movie shows, right? I mean, so the investment in this, you see as well with sports, the amount of money the Pentagon was spending, again, running into the hundreds of millions, into the billions of dollars, in terms of the propaganda. Whether it's through recruitment ads, whether it's through sponsoring, academic programs, or whether it's through, overflights of B-2 bombers at football games. The need to maintain that narrative is demonstrated by the billions of dollars they spend doing so.
Yeah, I think a lot of people aren't familiar with the Pentagon's kind of role within Hollywood as well. Just going actually back to a point there, like you said, your granddad was in World War II. To be fair, to
Well,
kind of, I guess,
great,
counter,
great
great,
uncle. Yeah,
great, okay. To
yeah,
counter, I guess, my point about everything's see-through, my generation doesn't really take
yeah.
Armistice Day and Remembrance Sunday as serious. Partly is because, my parents, they would have had granddads telling them stories about it. I don't have anyone alive who can
Right.
tell me a story about it and to keep it resonate. So that is a fair point to make. Just to ask you a question, I guess, considering you have probably a lot of colleagues and friends who obviously served in the military and yourself, how what's kind of your thoughts and feelings seeing what's happened with Syria? Obviously, the war on terror being about Al Qaeda. A lot of people signed up after 9/11. I think it influenced you from memory around that period of time. Also, you kind of joined the military. Um,
I joined in '98. So
Oh, okay,
yeah,
okay.
before, yeah, yeah.
But to see what's happened with Syria, to see him welcomed, I mean, there was that, I don't know the name of the senator, obviously, where he's got a prosthetic leg, the bald guy.
Brian Mast.
Yeah, and he's in the photo with Jolani, he's come to the UN and everything.
You talk about John McCain. I'm sorry. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
not
yeah,
John McCain. No, Jolani, the new, obviously, Syrian.
yeah.
He
Oh,
he was
okay,
with,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That's with Brian Mast. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
So like being, a veteran and knowing quite a few, like what's the kind of are people very angry about that, or has it been kind of like in the general public, I'm sure it's been brushed under and it's Trump and people love Trump, so that's all fine.
Yeah.
But how did it make you feel seeing obviously that? And you knew obviously it was a scam now, but like to actually this guy's be welcomed like that, how does that make you and other people feel?
Yeah, the idea that it's a betrayal in many ways, but it's a betrayal that we're the ones who are foolish for feeling even betrayed. Why should we even feel betrayed? I mean, this is the way it goes, and I think that's how most Americans view it. Oh, of course, it's all corrupt, it's all crooked. Again, you're holding these two different things: a fundamental distrust of the American government by most Americans with a trust and a belief in the American military, right? And it's just they're contradictory, but they coexist. So I think the reality that Al Qaeda's boss in Syria is now our ally. That's in line with other episodes of the United States allying with, reactionary elements, whether it's fascists, whether it's jihadists, whether it's criminal gangs, whether it be drug traffickers in the Mediterranean or Southeast Asia or Central America, right? I mean, this is what else could we have expected, Louis? The fact that he arrives in Washington, D.C. and he's welcomed into the White House on the 250th birthday of the U.S. Marine Corps, and just one day before Veterans Day is just makes the story even better, right? That's just like the chef's kiss on it all. But I mean, you've seen this willingness to accept the rehabilitation of Jolani back to his, original name, Ahmed al-Sharar, by the American media to go along with it. And to people not even bat an eye when David Petraeus interviewed him at an event in New York in September, when David Petraeus said, among other things, said, "Your success is our success," right? And so for the willingness of the American media, the foreign policy establishment, et cetera, to just accept his place within the empire now is logical. Because this is an empire that has a large umbrella, And so whoever comes in, you accept what you're being told about it. I mean, uh, was gonna say with Jolani with or Sharar as well. That story, the fact that he had only had a $10 million bounty, right? A year ago at this time, he still had a $10 million bounty on his head, and that it's just papered over and the excuses are accepted, that they're just offered. Oh, he's become nicer, or he no longer believes in Al Qaeda or whatever it is. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's still on Twitter. The 10 million bounty,
Right. Yeah.
the U.S. State Department in Syria. It's still on their Twitter. I don't know if the bounty. I don't know if it was taken off a year ago. I feel like it was still on till
No,
fairly.
it actually still. He only was removed from the terrorist list last week before he came, like the Friday before he came. So maybe that's when the bounty technically, maybe that's when it technically was removed.
But yeah, no, it is bizarre. Well, it's not bizarre. Like it's logical, as you said. If you're the U.S. empire, like it's not. If you followed Syria at all and
Yeah.
weren't, blinded by it, like this is the obvious. It's not. It's not.
I
It's not that
I
bizarre,
I
but
think it's just the
for
how
real.
overt it is, right, and how galling it is. I think that's why it's so hard for us to believe, right?
I mean, in a way, in a horrible world, it is almost good that it's happened because it just you can't dress up the war on terror like you can't. Like someone's in an argument now about the war on terror. It's about Al Qaeda. You just go, well, the guy who's the leader of Syria, which was a coup, an overthrow. Like he's from Al Qaeda. You can go back to everything he's done, who he's associated with, and it's like it just kills the argument. And again, people, like the whole thing with the new New York mayor, jihadist, fundamentalist, and like Jolani is in with Trump, like, and he's like, yeah, he has a tough past, but who doesn't? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Like, we've all got tough past, but I don't think I was quite up to the same thing as this guy. I mean,
Well,
he was in prison in Camp Buka with Baghdadi and like in Iraq and yeah, the tough past, yeah, sure.
yeah, and just the hypocrisy of the American establishment on this, certainly the idea that, or I should say, it's not hypocrisy because it's a pretty straight line. The continued abandonment of the Kurds, right? I mean, you see how Jolani or Shara is welcomed into the White House. Where does that leave the Kurds, right? It's clear in that division in Syria that the Kurds are once again second place, right? I mean, and again, that is understandable. That makes sense if you understand the American empire and how it operates. The willingness of Sharar to potentially align Syria with Israel. One as a mechanism against Iran, of course, but two, also to potentially shore up not just Israeli operations in Lebanon by controlling the border and everything, but to shore up Israel's annexation of the West Bank by making sure that Syria cannot support the Palestinians in the West Bank as Israel begins its, final years of annexation here. I mean, so you just it's revolting and it's sickening to look at all this that, but you also understand that these people align because they have interests that are in common.
I mean, people always go, "Oh, Israel just wants peace. Israel wants peace." I mean, they helped overthrow Syria. Netanyahu's bragged about how basically their destruction of Hezbollah helped the overthrow Syria. He even said that Iran sent fighter jets to help Assad. They sent ones back. They bombed like 500 times, loads, and they're trying to do is make peace, and Israel still hasn't yet agreed. And there's still, there's reports that again they've come to disagreement because they don't want to give up land, and this is still not enough. And it's just
Right.
like again, just like oh, Israel's all about peace. You can say oh they're Al Qaeda, but Israel brags about how they helped them. So, just to
Right.
finish up before I jump off, is there, I guess. how do you think we should celebrate Veterans Day in America, or whatever version of which war? How should it be celebrated as the next kind of veteran? How do you feel would be the right way to do it?
I think it's the way it was done 100 years ago, 100 and 7 years ago, or whenever they had the first march, 106 years ago, under the spirit of never again. The idea that's just not the horror of it, not just the waste of it all, but the corruption of it, the lies behind it, and that those who would utilize for war for their purposes politically, as well as to profit, uh, should not be in power. I think it's that message, that original message. That's what we should be replicating now. Um, I think it's not a question of pacifism. It's not a question of therapy. It's a question of the reality of warfare and the costs of it, and also the consequences. And so, just as I was saying before, Keynes speaking during the Versailles process, during the Versailles negotiations, about how if the Allies put these penalties, put this punishment on Germany, that what will come will be another war. And he's, completely accurate. He's very predictive on that, right? But that's just kind of common sense from the reality of warfare. If we want to start unpacking it all, Louis, and we go back from the First World War and start going backwards, at what point does a war begin based upon its own particular context, or based upon where it has a starting date in history, right? Where nothing before really influences the war we're talking about. I mean, so that's impossible. And so I think that is part of the larger message of never again. The idea to break that historical line, to break that continuity, and only by swearing it off and ensuring it cannot happen again can that historical line be broken.
Yep, that sounds like a good message. Yeah, well, thanks for coming on, Matt. I really appreciate your time. It's always good to chat to you. We'll have to talk again before 1 year's time.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, no, thanks again, Matt, and I'll speak to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Louis.